When you have to do more with less, it tempers you. The concept plays out in our daily lives, where the gap between the things we have and the things we want almost universally don't overlap completely. We've talked many times on the channel about how opportunity cost spares no one, and today's clan Omni-Mech reinforces that rule. The balance between armor, speed, and weaponry can be nudged gently, but always at the cost of one or both of the other variables. The numbers can be squeezed, manipulated, or even flat out abused to mitigate the effects, but the bill always comes due. The Gargoyle, or Man of War if you are a resident of the Inner Sphere, pushes that balance to an extreme. The blessing of clan technology saved the mech from the fate of the original Charger, but as we're going to see, what you do with what you have left after cramming a gigantic engine into an 80-ton mech can make a big difference. Let's not waste any time because you know I'm champing at the bit to talk about more Clan Wolf shenanigans. We came here expecting honorable combat, and all we have seen is cowardice upon cowardice, treachery upon treachery, deceit upon deceit. Their descent into these caves now means only they have entered their graves. My star, mount up with me upon Harriet's Gargoyle. Point Commander Ernest on Frederick's Mad Dog. Harriet, you shall be the battering ram which smashes through their lines to bring an end to this pointless uprising. Now go and bring glory to the bear. Del Villar heard a joyous chorus of Selah as the massive assault mech moved into position. Del Villar and her point caught the Gargoyle in mid-stride as it took position to charge. Second Chance, Error Report 3052 by Chris Husey. Following the success of the 75-ton Woodsman, Clan Wolf Science Cast members weren't ones to sit on their laurels. Under the uniquely capricious and bizarre clan economic system, it's always good to continually prove your worth. It wasn't as bad as life in the lower caste under the Smoke Jaguars, but that's a tale for another time. The results of the continued iteration on the Woodsman resulted in both the Timberwolf and Gargoyle. Both designs took advantage of extra light fusion engines to improve speed at the cost of slightly increased vulnerability. The Gargoyle is an interesting demonstration of several mech design principles which I have yammered about for years. They each revolve around the next step once an engineer decides to push that opportunity cost table outside of the norm. Sometimes it works and you end up with a specialist that can put up numbers or avoid incoming fire by being really fast. When it doesn't work, you end up with the Charger or an urban mech. With the Gargoyle, the goal was to create an assault Omni-Mech which could keep up with heavy mechs and be the rock against which the enemy crashes and fails. Unfortunately, due to how the math works out in BattleMech construction, the Gargoyle had a tough hill to climb. The biggest issue for the design is explained by looking at what it takes to make an 80-ton mech run at 86 km per hour versus what it takes to make a 75-ton mech move that fast. For the Timberwolf, that 375 extra light fusion engine weighed in at 19.5 tons. The Gargoyle's 400 XL engine weighed in at 26.5 tons. Now I know I struggle with basic math, but 26.5 is 7 more than 19.5, and this creates a unique problem for justifying the Gargoyle's existence. Now it may not be entirely fair to compare the mech to a machine like the Timberwolf, but when it's Clan Wolf's decision where to direct resources for both of these machines, it does make one wonder why Gargoyle production was greenlit. Whatever those reasons were, they couldn't purely have been based on the technicals. Now that we've covered that base, I do want to make it clear that I actually like the Gargoyle. This isn't going to be one of those videos where I have nothing but negative things to say, quite the opposite actually. With one notable exception, I don't make that sort of content, so for the purposes of positivity, we're going to let go of the Timberwolf comparison and look at what the designers were able to accomplish with the Gargoyle. There's some good stuff in here once we dig in. The 80-ton Gargoyle was constructed from a Clan Series Assault SXC chassis wrapped around that previously mentioned 400 model SF3 Extra Light Fusion engine. This set the movement profile at 580, which made the mech the fastest Clan assault at that point on the timeline. The engine allowed for 16 internal double heat sinks, which is an underrated benefit. The 11 tons of ferrofibrous armor provided 211 points of protection, which was 2 tons below the max possible for an 80-ton mech, and created a defensive profile much closer to a heavy mech than its fellow assaults. The 85-ton Warhawk, for example, carried 13.5 tons of armor, and the 75-ton Timberwolf carried 12 tons. Once the gyro and cockpit were zip-tied in and attached with toggle bolts, that left just 21.5 tons of pod space for equipment. With considerably less pod space than both the 75 and 85-ton options for Omni-Mechs, the Gargoyle was placed into a tough but not impossible position. In order to justify its existence, those 21.5 tons had to be spent wisely. As we're going to see when looking into the first of the official configurations, sometimes it's handled well and sometimes not so well. The Prime configuration was built around a pair of LB-5X autocannons split between the arms, which each had their own dedicated ton of ammunition in the side torsos. They were backed up by a pair of short-range Missile 6 racks, which had their own side torso ammo bins. Finally, because it needed a weapon that could carry the rest of the loadout, an ER small laser was added to the center torso. So if we're looking at the question, was this pod space used well, I think it's fairly obvious that, in this case, it was not. While the Prime could pester targets at great distances with the twin LBX autocannons, their damage output was paltry in comparison to most other long-range weaponry. Combined with the ammunition, 16 tons of the 21.5 in total, or 74.5% of the overall pod space, was dedicated to a pair of weapons that did 5 damage apiece. While I'm sure an argument could be made for the LB-5X having a place, that place is not on the Gargoyle. With all 4 of the primary weapons in the arms, those who encountered the Gargoyle Prime learned quickly that its already modest weaponry could be further curtailed if fire is focused on the limbs. Leaving the mech armless and moving on to more dangerous targets was a great way to make sure the warrior in the Gargoyle's cockpit was furious and having a clan spec tantrum. Production runs of the Gargoyle predictably ended up in the Wolf Tumen, but not exclusively. By the point at which the Crusader clans were calling for an invasion of the Inner Sphere, the mech could be found among the Tumens of everyone involved. Even the Ice Hellions ended up procuring their own source of Gargoyles because it fit with the clan's fondness for things that go faster than you expect. The impression that the available information leaves is that the Gargoyle was considered okay, fine I guess. It beats running at the enemy holding a stick with a nail hammered into it, I suppose. Perhaps the rest of the original configurations can give us some insight into why the mech saw continued production after 2945. The Gargoyle A config tried from scratch with an energy weapon loadout featuring a pair of ERPPCs set into the right arm. The left arm large pulse laser nearly matched the range of the PPCs and set up a 1-2-3 punch, which drastically increased the damage potential over the Prime configuration. For closer range dancing, an ER medium laser, a medium pulse laser, and finally an ER small laser joined the LPL in the left arm. While at a glance the A configuration is obviously much stronger than the Prime at all ranges, it did require the Mechwarrior to keep a keen eye on the mech's heat generation. While running and gunning with 2 ERPPCs was heat neutral, the temptation to add in that large pulse laser quickly leaves the mech looking for a cool lake in which to stand. If we were handing out grades for configurations, the Prime's C- was taken out to the woodshed by the A config's A. We endure. We adapt. We persevere. It has always been so with the Wolves, leaders among the clans ever since the first days of the Pentagon campaign. The great Nicholas Kerensky recognized our superiority by adopting Clan Wolf as his own. Seldom has any significant event in clan history occurred in which the Wolves were not involved, or at least consulted. Despite the terrible trials of recent years, which many believed would damage Clan Wolf beyond redemption, still the clan survives. Daphne Vickers, Loremaster of Clan Wolf in Exile, October 13th, 3060. Field Manual, Warden Clans. Scurrying through the other original configurations takes us to the B, which went another direction with an all-ballistics and missile build. The primary heavy hitter is the right-arm mounted Gauss rifle, which fed from 2 tons of ammunition. It was backed up at long range by a long-range Missile 10 launcher in the left arm, aided by an Artemis 4 fire control system, which increased the number of missiles that could hit the target. It could chew through its single ton of ammunition in the same arm. Finally, an Artemis 4 boosted short-range Missile 4 rack was set into the left arm along with its 1 ton of ammunition. While the appeal of the 15 damage Gauss rifle can't be understated, the ammunition-dependent build struggles to justify its existence in all but the briefest of battles. Unless you're really into the Gauss rifle, the A configuration is going to retain its crown. The 4th bite at the original apple with the config C returned to the land of autocannons with the installation of an Ultra AC-20 in the left arm, which fed from 2 tons of ammunition in the left torso. That's just 10 shots, so the Mechwarrior would need to make them count. The right arm was blessed by 6 ER medium lasers, which could end up being a more terrifying threat from this Gargoyle. At 7 damage apiece and in medium range at 10 hexes, the ER mediums are fearsome, especially since the Gargoyle's 16 double heat sinks allow it to run and fire all 6 of the lasers while remaining heat neutral. The combination of lasers and getting an opportunity to hit from that Ultra AC-20 makes the C configuration a powerful foe, if a temporary one. If you just need a little bit more, there was enough mass remaining for the addition of 3 A-pods to the C configuration's legs to help with clearing out hostile infantry that wandered too close. If you need a refresher, A-pods or anti-personnel pods are one-shot weapons that can be triggered before attacking infantry make their 2-hit rolls. The A-pod does 1d6 minus 1 damage to the infantry unit. Unfortunately, it doesn't damage battle armor units, so if you want to deal with that threat, you have to upgrade to the B-pods. Overall, the C configuration Gargoyle gave the A config a run for its money and most powerful use of the pod space. While I'm not normally a huge fan of the AC-20, in this case I can give the Mechfrog croak of approval. The last of the original configurations was the D, and it leaned into the energy weapon trough and fell in. 2 ER large lasers split between the arms allowed the Gargoyle D to operate as a long-range skirmisher if necessary. Their aim, along with the rest of the build, was improved thanks to the left torso targeting computer. Should it need to close in, 3 medium pulse lasers split between the arms and center torso promised consistent devastating fire. A -3 boost to the 2-hit roll is scary good. Don't be caught in a mech that depends upon speed to avoid being hit around this thing. For the closest range conflict resolution, an ER small laser in the center torso offered its modest 5 damage. In order to address the obvious heat issues that would manifest when you fired all of these lasers at once, 4 additional double heat sinks were added to the mech, split between the side torsos. An Alpha Strike on the run was actually heat neutral for the D configuration, so until its opponent could knock off those arms or otherwise trip it up, this is a Gargoyle that's going to be everyone's problem all the time. The raw damage potential was lower than the A or C, but with the improved accuracy and ability to keep firing without any ammunition woes, the scales were evened a bit. Something tugged him back into full consciousness, however, as he cycled through his displays once again. The shape of the cluster's advance looked off. Then he saw it. Wilfred. He's too close. Wilfred stood on the leading edge of the line, where his Gargoyle was undoubtedly burning through its ammunition reserves, and at this distance, his mech did not favor. Mechwarrior Wilfred stepped back behind the main advance. "I'm fine, Star Commander. I can hold..." Wilfred's voice was drowned out as his second shootist squared off to his Omni-Mech and unleashed the full force of its large-bore autocannon and large laser. The resulting devastation turned the Gargoyle in place and sent it crashing to the ground. The Spirit of Cooperation, Tukayyid 3rd Edition. With the arrival of the outbound light vessel in clan space in 3048, the machinations of the Warden and Crusader clans reached a boiling point. The Gargoyle had a role to play in the drama, as it was the battle mech that Wolfcon Ulrich Kerensky took into battle. Ulrich did his best to prevent Operation Revival from moving forward, including fighting in a trial of refusal, where he used his Gargoyle to cause as much harm as possible to his foes before losing anyway. The Crusader clans made a crucial mistake when they cajoled Clan Wolf into joining the invasion, as Ulrich's wolves seemed to always be acting in ways that resulted in stifling of the operation's ultimate goal of, winning. Though Ulrich's stated goal was to claim Terra first and become the IlClan to control the destiny of the entire operation, as it was for the other clans, he was the one who disclosed to the Comstar Precentor Marshal that Terra was the ultimate destination for the clan invasion. He also negotiated the trial on Tukayyid, which proved to be a boondoggle for the entire effort. Even when all was said and done and Ulrich faced accountability for his behavior both as Khan of the Wolves and IlKhan in charge of the failed invasion, he refused to take the L. While his expected trial of refusal could have been handled at a small scale, Ulrich bid the entirety of Clan Wolf's 2 men in the fight in order to cause as much damage to his enemies as possible, before dying anyway. Before his final breath was taken on Wotan, Ulrich Kerensky told his clan that it was their mission to defend the Inner Sphere from the threat represented by the other clans. There's probably a moral to this story involving not including people in your mission when they're just going to drag their feet and sabotage it at every opportunity, but I'm already several minutes into this rant, and I can already hear the Clan Wolf fans champing at the bit to tell me I have it all wrong. At least all Ulrich's efforts were rewarded a century later when the Crusader Alaric took Terra after brutally murdering his way across the Inner Sphere. So let's just move on. Ulrich's voice boomed through his helmet's speakers. "Greetings, Vaughn. And to you, Ulrich. When I suggested this duel, I had no idea you would bring seconds. You can consider them seconds if you wish. For me, they serve as witnesses." The Jade Falcon Khan laughed. "My gun camera video will be witness enough to your death." "Possibly, but such things are often damaged when a mech is destroyed." Ulrich's humanoid gargoyle opened its arms. "Do you require some sort of formal declaration of intent, or shall we begin?" "It has already begun, Ulrich." Bred for War by Michael A. Stackpole. Our next official configuration was the personal build for a Star Colonel Connell Ward, who was Loremaster of Clan Wolf in 3051 when Ulrich Kerensky became IlKhan. The 2 men did not see eye to eye on many things, including the destiny of the clans. Connell Ward was a Crusader and not a particularly meek one at that. This was a problem for Ulrich as he took up the IlKlan mantle and needed to pick a new Khan of Clan Wolf. After Natasha Kerensky's ascension to Khan and the shenanigans on Tukayyid, Connell Ward saw the writing on the wall. With Felon Ward taking over as Khan, Connell endorsed the pick and then resigned as Loremaster. Already in his early 60s, Connell's career had been longer than the vast majority of clan warriors could ever expect. Ultimately, he ended up taking command of the 31st Wolf Salama cluster as a Star Colonel. Under normal circumstances, this might be the end of a clan warrior's story. However, in 3055, Connell Ward ended up wrapped up in the hunt for a band of pirates known as the Corsairs. I won't spoil the story, but Operational Turning Points, the Red Corsair, has the rundown as well as Connell Ward's custom Gargoyle record sheet. It has pirates, clanners, and even the Kellhounds get involved in a fight that threatens to plunge the region into renewed conflict. Connell Ward's Gargoyle sported a pair of ERPPCs in the right arm as the main damage dealers, though at closer range they were backed up by twin Streak SRM-6 launchers set into the left torso, which fed from a single ton of ammunition. The config was host to both a light version of target acquisition gear and an ECM suite, making this our first Operation Sneaky Sneak Gargoyle of the day. Finally, a pair of APODs were split between the legs to help infantry shuffle the mortal coil. The Connell configuration was a good use of available pod space, with the only real weakness of being that single ton of Streak SRM-6 ammunition, which could end up going quick with 2 launchers eating from it. Thomason and Daniel completed their circle, taking a strafing run at the Gargoyle from the other side. Their impressive light show flensed armor from its arms and legs, getting them one step closer to bringing it down. Their teal laser beams created a blinding mass of light, searing all over the Gargoyle. More than half the lasers must have missed, because when the melted armor stopped flowing from the combined attack, the Gargoyle was not only still standing, its march to meet the Ghost Birds hadn't even slowed. Without Question by Brian Young. The next official bite at the apple arrived in 3059, designated the Gargoyle H configuration. It featured a large heavy laser in the left arm and an Ultra AC-10 autocannon in the right arm as the mech's primary punches. An LRM-10 launcher in the left torso added its modest fire along with 2 left arm mounted ER medium lasers. It was a little bit of everything build that doesn't have any serious downsides. Heat management is minimal and ammunition stocks acceptable for most engagements. It's the okayest of configurations. 1 year later, in 3060, the Gargoyle E was spotted, which carried several new pieces of tech. The fanciest was the Advanced Tactical Missile 12 launcher in the right arm, which could feed from 3 tons of ammo in the same limb. That allowed for all 3 ammunition types, but the Mechwarrior had to be a savvy spender, as each ton had only 5 shots worth of missiles. The rest of the build was entirely devoted to short-range brawling. 4 medium-heavy lasers were split, 2 in the left arm and 2 in the left torso, and they were accuracy neutral thanks to the installation of a targeting computer in the center torso. The left torso-mounted Streak SRM-6 sat next to its 1 ton of ammunition. 2 ER micro lasers were set into the right torso and also benefited from the targeting computer. And finally, 2 additional pod heat sinks were wrapped up into the build. While the default loadout for ATMs would be 1 of each type of ammunition, I think the ideal here would be carrying a second ton of high explosive munitions instead of the extended range type. The third ton could be standard ammo for use if anything survived the initial 10 shots of high explosive. In combination with the 4 medium-heavy lasers and the occasional lock with the Streak SRM-6, the Gargoyle E has an extremely high damage potential. With 18 double heat sinks, the E config can alpha strike without going too far into the red. I wasn't the only one to notice just how powerful this configuration was. Khan Silas Kafol of Clan Coyote picked it for a trial of grievance fight against the Cloud Cobra Khan in 3068. The Gargoyle and Warhawk traded blows until Khan Kafal closed and was able to finally core out the Cloud Cobra mech. Lacking any mercy toward the leader responsible for declaring a Reaving against the Coyotes, Kafal continued to pour fire into the stricken Warhawk even after the fight was clearly decided. Hell hath no fury like a coyote scorned. At the crest of the ridge, a huge Omni-Mech with scarred armor stepped forward to bar their passage. The heavily built, humanoid man-of-war stood only 10 meters tall, but there in the pass, skylined as it was, it looked to Victor the way Goliath must have to David. The Smoke Jaguar mech's handless arms came up, with the barrels of 2 particle projection cannons forming the right forearm and a quartet of laser muzzles blossoming at the wrist of the left arm. The Omni-Mech was a formidable foe, but Victor knew it would fall precisely because it had to fall. Grave Covenant by Michael A. Stackpole. In 3068, the Gargoyle M dipped its toes into the hyper-assault Gauss waters with the installation of a HAG-20 into the right arm. Its 18 shots did the scatter damage out to 24 hexes and was paired up with an ERPPC in the opposite arm. The remaining tonnage was spent on a trio of SRM-2s in the left torso, which all fed from a single ton of ammunition next to the launchers. While the HAG rifles can be quite fun, in comparison to the stronger entries in the config series, the M has a return to a more modest form. There's not a lot to say about it unless you're really into HAG technology. It was described in the technical records as most likely a failed attempt at meshing the HAG into the Gargoyle and then quickly abandoned. If it was spotted at all, it was among the Hell's Horses and Fire Mandrills. 1 year later, in 3069, the G configuration was recorded among the Tumen of the Ice Hellions. It fielded an LB-20X autocannon in the right arm, which fed from 3 tons of right torso-mounted ammunition. The big cannon was backed up by a quartet of ER medium lasers set into the left torso. For close-range squabbles with infantry, 3 anti-personnel Gauss rifles were installed into the left arm and fed from a single ton of ammunition. Word has it that the Hellions used the G configuration to counter the infantry and vehicles, which made up a higher than usual percentage of the Hell's Horses Tumen. While not necessarily a niche config, the G struggles from just not having quite enough pod space to devote to a single massive weapon. The 4 ER medium lasers can't be dismissed, but going back to our original premise, when you have less to work with, you have to make the most of it. With the trials and tribulations of both the Wars of Reaving and the Word of Blake kerfuffle, production of many classic Omni-Mech designs suffered or ended entirely. The Wolves had a functioning Gargoyle factory in their operational zone in the inner sphere that apparently was damaged, but there were ancillary buildings with enough parts that existing Gargoyles in the Wolf Tumen could be kept up and running. When the Hell's Horses took over the same turf following the Wolf move, they reactivated the Gargoyle production line on Tamar. In 3093, the Gargoyle P configuration once again showed off a piece of new tech. Though the primary weapons were undoubtedly the twin large pulse lasers set into the right arm, the two plasma cannons in the left arm offered their own unique brand of battlefield terror. Useful for driving up the temperature of heat-sinked targets and completely devastating everything else, the plasma cannons could chew through 3 tons of ammunition, which is 15 shots apiece. The last addition to the mech was a micro-pulse laser in the center torso, which does its adorably accurate 3 damage out to 3 hexes. While not able to put up big numbers like other configurations, the P-config's threat to non-heat-sinked targets and fast movers is clear. As a niche build, this Gargoyle could be a menace in the right time and place. The rest of our Gargoyle configurations are from the 32nd century. There's a big leap from the P to the X configuration, which arrived in 3128. Things are going to get a little weird, so buckle up. The Gargoyle X featured an ATM-9 launcher in the left arm along with 6 ER medium lasers set into the left arm. The 3 tons of ATM ammunition in the left torso were given Case 2, so that's pretty nice. A small pulse laser in the center torso offered its modest but accurate damage, and finally the infamous TS EMP cannon made its appearance in the left arm. For the uninitiated, the TS EMP cannon can partially and sometimes completely disable a target with a focused EMP attack. It happens to be one of my least favorite weapons in the BattleTech universe because it can completely take the opponent out of the game. As we all know, everyone loves to be forced to sit there and watch as someone blows away your unit without any ability to respond. Good times had by all. The X configuration is functional, though I think the TS EMP makes the build a friendship tester. Unless you're playing against someone who's hyper-competitive and enjoys the abuse, I don't think you're going to get to use it more than once. She advanced on the Goliath Scorpion line. Her opponent, in a Gargoyle, stepped forward as he became aware of her attack. His mistake. Sporting missiles and a single Gauss rifle, the Gargoyle was ill-configured for such close-range fighting. And in moving forward, the other Mechwarrior had abandoned the grove of trees that had offered slight protection. Valerie Sender thrust both of her mech's arms forward and triggered all of the massive machine's weapons, targeting the Gargoyle's already damaged torso. Crusader Clan's Sourcebook. In 3145, the Gargoyle F threw its hat into the ring as one of the more non-traditional builds in the Gargoyle pantheon. The primary weapon was a right-arm mounted improved heavy large laser which could do its 16 damage out to 15 hexes. It was backed up by a pair of advanced tactical missile 3 launchers set into the right arm. A rotary AC-2 in the left arm promised to test if everyone on the battlefield remembered their ear protection. The 2 tons of included ammunition for the RAC-2 provided plenty of opportunity for the Mechwarrior to really get it up and going without too much worry about running the bins dry. Finally, a heavy flamer set into the center torso made closing into hugging range a good way to test your unit's flammability. Say what you want about the Hell's Horses, they sure do get creative with their Omni-Mech configs. In the same year, the Gargoyle I debuted with a very warm all-energy build. 3 ER large lasers were installed into the right arm, providing that 1-2-3 punch at long range, which was actually not that unrealistic, considering the extra pod heatsink allowed for firing all 3 while on the run and only ending up at 4 heat. If the Gargoyle did need to close in on its target, the 2 large improved heavy lasers provided plenty of punch in 16 damage chunks. Doing so on the run also conveniently left the I config at just 4 heat, so long as you could resist adding in those ER large lasers to the volley. A full alpha strike with all 5 lasers generated 68 heat, 70 if you're on the run, so it's probably not a good idea to do that unless you have no other options or don't mind sitting around for a while as your mech systems reboot after the shutdown. The downsides obviously include the heat generation and the fact that the improved heavy lasers explode when critically hit, but at least the left arm has Case 2 on it. The side torsos are bare except for the XL engine criticals, so that has to be a consideration as well. The config I could be a fun way to try out the improved heavy laser tech on an otherwise fairly simple build. Now, if you're looking at the previous entries and feeling like there's still something missing, I don't blame you. Thankfully, the Gargoyle J configuration exists to remind us that mechs are happier when they can jump great distances on plumes of plasmic fire. This config's primary weapons were a quartet of medium improved heavy lasers all set into the right arm. They were backed up by 7 ER small lasers installed into the left arm. Though the ranges are limited to spitting distance, the Alpha Strike potential damage is technically 75 points, which can't be entirely dismissed. Of course, you do have to get very close to pull this off in a Charger-esque build. Thankfully, the 7 improved jump jets installed into the side and center torsos make the closing on a target all that much easier. While obviously a pretty niche build, the J configuration leads into it in all the right ways and can pull it off. This is a gargoyle that could be a lot of fun on the tabletop. The Man-O-War slowly extended its left arm. A thick, stubby gun barrel had replaced the Omni-Mech's hand. As the muzzle lifted to point at Barclay's face, she watched, frozen in place, as the weapon's gaping maw grew a set of blood-stained fangs of its own, then belched forth fire and death. With a choked cry of fear, Sandra Barclay snapped awake, blinking uncertainly at the walls of her field tent. Outside the nylon canvas walls, she could hear the sounds of an encamped army. It gradually came to her that she was on Huntress in the Eridani Lighthorse bivouac, not on Coventry in the besieged city of Lietnerton. She was fighting the Smoke Jaguars, not the Jade Falcons. A shuddering breath escaped her throat. Shadows of War, Twilight of the Clans Volume 6, by Thomas S. Gressman. The most recent official configuration on our timeline is the Gargoyle K, and it's an interesting beast. This close-range brawler's weaponry is focused on getting up in someone's business, like an HOA president holding a ruler and a clear schedule. 4 medium-improved heavy lasers in the left arm pack the primary punch, though they are bolstered by 3 Streak SRM-4 launchers split between the side and center torso locations. An active probe aided in hunting down targets, and finally, because this configuration has seen a lot of use while hunting down pirates, a hatchet in the right arm offers the possibility of doing 16 damage to anyone or anything that wanders too close. Much like the J config, the Gargoyle K trades range for damage potential. In order to facilitate closing in on the target quickly, a center torso supercharger can temporarily boost the movement profile for the mech up to 510, which rivals the benefit of the J's improved jump jets. Isn't it nice to have the options? Reports indicate that the Gargoyle K was used effectively against mechs fielded by the new Oberon Confederation. The Ks were able to close faster than their opponents expected, and it threw a wrench into their plans not to, well, not die. Since it's getting to be a bit of a habit, I did take a crack at creating my very own totally unofficial and non-canon Gargoyle configuration. So if you'll indulge me, I present to you the Gargoyle MF. The goal for this was to create a skirmisher that could keep its distance and cause tremendous damage while also being a rough and tumble machine up close. The left arm ERPPC is augmented by both a PPC capacitor and the installation of a targeting computer in the left torso. Should the MF need to get into the fray, a center torso supercharger can make it happen faster than most would expect. The 3 medium pulse lasers in the right arm are also boosted by the targeting computer, making their 7 damage apiece incredibly accurate. The right torso anti-missile system can keep the mech up and running a little bit longer, and finally the center torso machine gun is there for moral support. While the overall damage at range might appear modest in comparison to mechs like the Warhawk, the Gargoyle MF has consistency and accuracy on its side. If you're keen on giving the MF config a try, I've included the record sheet and Alpha Strike card in the Dropbox link in the video notes below. Go smack something with a charged ERPPC and tell me that's not fun. The first mech to enter the clearing was a massive gargoyle, its man-shaped head painted to look like a rabid wolf with bronze eyes. He saw the image at the same time as the audible tone of weapons lock hummed seductively in his ear. The wolf mech was raising its right arm, its autocannon and missiles readying to fire, even as Seng let go with his own long-range missiles, followed closely with a blast from his large lasers. There was a rush and a pitch imbalance as the Timberwolf let go its barrage. The majority of the missiles slammed into the legs and lower torso of the gargoyle, while a few missed and hit in the woods behind it, shaking the massive trees as if a ground quake struck. His large lasers, bright red coherent beams, sliced into the missile impact area, sending armor plate flying from the right leg and left arm of the gargoyle, staggering it back under the assault. Roar of Honor by Blaine Lee Pardo. So why do we love the gargoyle? This is one where I think the mech has unfairly earned a bit of a bad rap. Though the prime configuration defies logic and reinforces the fact that you have to spend that 21.5 tons of pod space well, the other configurations trend toward good and even great. It would be easy to dismiss the gargoyle as just the clan charger, but I don't think that's very fair. All the pieces necessary to make the gargoyle an efficient machine were there from the get-go. It just takes a keen eye and to see past the prime to find the gems just behind it. If you're a big fan of the gargoyle, keep an eye out for Ronan Carlyle in the new fiction involving the new Grey Death Legion. After finding a Gargoyle C configuration from a family-owned salvage yard, he has made the mech his own. Much stomping and Ultra AC-20 nonsense is sure to follow. The Price of Duty by Jason Schmetzer has the rundown. Of course, I'm curious what you think about the gargoyle. Is it not worth the effort in comparison to its peers, or are you happy to run it alongside the heavies in your clan stars? Is there a configuration that you think best utilizes that 21.5 tons of pod space? Let me know in the comments and we can keep that conversation going. Thanks as always for coming out today. If you think the video deserves it and you want to show your support, the easiest way to do that is to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment. All of those things make the YouTube algorithm happy. If you want to go one step further, direct support through Ko-fi is ideal and the link is in the video notes. Though YouTube channel memberships are still a thing and much appreciated. Without strong community support, this wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to join the nonsense and even share off your own painted battle mechs and future videos, join our Discord server where people get a heads up about what's coming up next and have a chance to chat about all things BattleTech. With that, I'll say thanks again. Please go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.